Well, there's a big piece of breaking news coming in right now. Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered the military to put nuclear deterrence forces on high alert. Reports say the Russian president has ordered the defense minister and the chief of the military's general staff to put the nuclear deterrent forces in a special regime of combat duty. Again, Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered the military to put nuclear deterrence forces on high alert. Reports say the Russian president has ordered the defense minister and the chief of the military's general staff to put the nuclear deterrent forces in a special regime of combat duty. Dr. Anna Matvieva, a Russian affairs analyst, is joining us live from London, and Alexander Bratetsky, a senior analyst, Finnem Newswire. They're both, he's joining us in Moscow. Thank you both for joining us. There has been big breaking news right now. Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered the military to put nuclear deterrence forces on high alert. I will start with you, Alexander. What does this mean?
Well, that actually means that he has said that Russia is ready to show its might, its force to the West. I don't think so that Russia will fire those nuclear forces, because that will be the end of Russian Federation itself. And President Putin knows this. But however, he wants to show this in order to kind of show his mightness. But the interesting reason is that while he's saying this, negotiations are soon to start with the Ukrainian side. So it looks like he's sending the conflicting messages and saying, like, this is a deal that I'm trying to make with Ukraine on my own conditions, and I have power to show you who I am. But this is only because no president of Russian Federation of the Soviet Union have ever used this kind of things, although during the Cold War. But it looks like this seems to be his an ability to show that, yes, we do have nuclear weapons, we put them on high alert, but I don't think so something's going to happen, thankfully. But right now, I don't just give any prognosis, because the situation is so complicated. But I don't think so we're going to bring on a nuclear war, that's for sure.
Dr. Matvieva, what do you make of this latest development? What is your interpretation of what Vladimir Putin has announced?
Well, as Alexander just said, it's absolutely incredible, totally unprecedented. So two theories here. One is that Putin is a rational actor, and all he's doing is sending a strong geopolitical signal to the West, simultaneously trying to force Ukraine to accept Russian security concerns and act on its terms. The other theory is that Putin is irrational, that he has really started to feel that he has the kind of power of the world, almost like in the James Bond movie. And in that case, if we accept this kind of Putin derangement syndrome, then it is very, very disturbing, because it can be serious. Now, Putin is in the central Russian political system, but he is not a Russian Tsar, he is not Ivan the Terrible. There are other people around him. So we have the senior military and security officials, we have civilian officials, and let us just hope that they are not infected by the same syndrome. So Putin is really going off the rails, that there will be people around him within the Russian political establishment who would be able to stop it.
Alexander, what message is Putin trying to put across to the West with this new announcement?
As my colleague has said, I would subscribe to her view. Yes, President Putin, from being a very reserved and realistic politician of, let's say, of Tito-like, the former leader of Yugoslavia, has turned into more figures like Salazar or Franco in his own way, waging the war against the sovereign country. Well, he also a good student of Bill Clinton, who has bombed Yugoslavia in 1991, and George Bush, who waged war against Iraq. They also had reasons for that. I mean, everybody has reasons. So, as I said, the presidential entourage also, and I agree with my colleague, is not united, I believe. So There are people in the former military generals. Just before the Ukraine conservative generals has sent a letter to Putin warning him to step down as a commander-in-chief. So looks like the whole picture is very complicated. We'll see the development, and I think in a couple of maybe a couple of days. So if negotiations will be on Russian terms, if President Zelensky will agree on certain conditions, that maybe a withdrawal of NATO, probably this will be the end of those hostilities, because otherwise we'll have a war in Europe, which will be, and Ukraine will turn into another Yugoslavia number 2.
Dr. Matviva, do you agree with the sentiments that Alexander is saying, that probably this would be or would indicate an end to this conflict?
My prediction, but I have been wrong in the past, so I would not be able to claim, absolute righteousness here, that we probably will see a fairly swift resolution one way or another. There may be a breakthrough at negotiations now because Kiev really is on the verge of major assault, which has not been really started. The same with Kiev. We have suburbs overtaken, we have skirmishes, but we do not see a major fight with civilian casualties in major cities. That is something which might come, and it might come even later today. Hopefully not, but that's a reality. The other thing which Russian leadership takes very seriously and is very worried is now reinforced deliveries of weapons to Ukraine. So the more Ukraine is getting armed, the more it is an urge on the Russian army to make progress before all these weapons actually are delivered and fall in the hands of the armed forces of Ukraine. So yes, I think that action, if it is planned, will happen very soon, unless the war is stopped today and at least a ceasefire is negotiated in Homel in Belarus.
Let me bring your attention to this new report. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko is saying that he is ready to deploy nuclear weapons if Poland or Lithuania do it. Alexander, this question is to you. What role does Belarus play in this conflict?
Well, Belarus now, I mean, it actually lost its independent policy soon after all this uprising and the clashes with the opposition. In Lukashenko, from sort of like playing a Ceausescu of his own sort in the Warsaw Pact, has turned it into sort of an Erich Honecker. And Belarus is now as a DDR, Eastern Germany, of a Russian Federation of the Soviet Union. So it's actually the country which doesn't have its sovereign policy anymore. When Lukashenko wants to even ask Putin why doesn't he make him a colonel of a Russian army. From the nationalist leader who supported the Belarusian cause and balanced it with the West. So Lukashenko is fully in Putin's hands. So that's a very sad thing, very sad factor, because he is actually probably willing to not even to put nuclear weapons, but let's say to open the base of Russia, let's say with helicopters or jet fighters, in order to be sort of a front state with Poland, the NATO member. So this is the message he's sending. But that's also not supported probably by many Belarusians, because the union with the Belarus and Russia existed for many years just on paper. Nobody really cared about it. And Belarus and Russia had very tense relationship in many ways. But now, because Lukashenko lost that balance with the West and is no more, a Western kind of like a friendly dictator. So that's why he's offering himself and his territory for Russian weaponry.
Dr. Matviva and Alexander, stay with me because I want your insights following this next report on WION. And as Russian troops continue to unleash their assault on Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities, West is ramping up measures to impose more sanctions on Russia, targeting its economy. In the latest, Western allies have now agreed on a new list of financial sanctions against Moscow. European Union has proposed banishing a number of Russian banks from the SWIFT interbank system. With this, West will ensure that these Russian banks are disconnected from the international financial system. The allies have also agreed to impose restrictive measures to prevent the Russian central bank from deploying its international reserves. Well, Dr. Anna Matviva and senior analyst Alexander Bratetsky are still with us. Thank you very much both for staying with us. Alexander, a Russian official recently noted that while SWIFT is convenient, it is not the only way of transferring money. However, there are still calls to sever Russia from the main global payment system. What does the suspension mean for Russia? Will it have far-reaching consequences?
I think it will, in a way. But of course, people are going to use telex and fax. They're going to use the Chinese system. It's bearable. I mean, the most thing that Russia would turn. It doesn't matter what actually. The SWIFT is not the most important thing, or the banks, can actually rely. Or let's say we're not in the Soviet Union anymore, so our businesses can produce certain things, quality shoes and jeans or whatever food they could produce, right? We actually have a capitalist economy. Iran is actually surviving. The biggest thing is actually cutting us from the modern day technology, which is used a lot in the civilian sector. So only our Chinese friends can actually bring us something. The only thing is that the most important thing, I talked to a senior economist yesterday, and he said the moral thing is very important. For example, they're now cutting all those performances by artists like Valery Gergiev, a very talented conductor, but staunch Putin supporter, is banned from New York Carnegie Hall. Mr. Matsuev, who's also a talented piano player, but staunch Putin supporter, is also banned, in the West. So the foreign artists couldn't come over. The ballet dancing troops maybe that sounds really funny for someone, but actually that cuts Russia from the culture scene of the of the West. And even Putin supporters like to see Western movies in Russian theaters. Probably those new movies they would not be able to see in a movie theater. So all of this also puts Russia into kind of situation. And speaking about SWIFT, I would recall Jonathan Swift, a very famous British writer, who wrote there was a battle between those people who were breaking acts from one piece, from one corner. Yeah, so I think that's something that reminds me of the war between Russia and Ukraine right now. And that's very sad, although it's humoristic way, but it's very sad.
Well, Dr. Matviva, this is what Putin said in his address. We'll go back to, what Putin was saying about the nuclear arsenal. You see that Western countries are not only unfriendly to our country in the economic sphere, I mean illegitimate sanctions. Senior officials of leading NATO countries also allow aggressive statements against our country. What do you make of that statement, Dr. Matviva?
Yeah, I think he probably has some point, because I think Western leaders should really be thinking of the consequences of their actions and also of their posturing, and also the way their sanctions and also their political positions and moves now in this heating atmosphere can make the situation worse and shift Putin towards greater aggression, while we all want to see the situation started to de-escalate. I give you one example. Russia has been now excluded from the Council of Europe, which is a very important human rights European body. Russia has been there since quite a long time, since the early 90s. Now, the Participation Council of Europe requires not having a death penalty. Russia didn't abolish the death penalty entirely, but it has a moratorium, and there have not been executions since Soviet times. Now they are saying, okay, now we can reintroduce death penalty, and for example, those people in the Russian army, Russian soldiers or Russian officers, may be potentially be tried for high treason if they refuse to fight against civilians in Ukraine. And then they will be traitors, so they can be accused of high treason and potentially can be executed. So that was probably not the best move to stop the fire. The West has very little to offer in terms of de-escalation and negotiation. We are looking at, yes, countries like Belarus. I absolutely agree with what Alexander said, but he still has a role to play. He is now probably one of the very few mediators who can offer something in terms of being a go-between.
All right.
And yes, Russian people would feel that they are now treated as pariahs, as people, not just as a country.
Well, This is also breaking news. Ukraine presidency agrees to hold talks with Russia at Belarus border. This after Lukashenko's call to Zelensky, where he assured that the Ukrainian delegation will meet with the Russian delegation without preconditions on the Ukrainian-Belarusian border near the Pripyat River. Now, Alexander Lukashenko assumed responsibility for the fact that all planes, helicopters and missiles deployed on Belarusian territory will remain on the ground for the duration of the passage, negotiations and return of the Ukrainian delegation. Alexander, are these signs of a truce, you think? Because I want to know, what role does Alexander Lukashenko play in this conflict? Probably he is a mediator. Is he?
Well, I would say if he gives his territory and Gomel is nearby Ukrainian border, that's possibly. I mean, Lukashenko is just giving his territory. He is in this way acting like a Switzerland, is trying to win himself certain points. Even his behavior in the recent days, he wants to show that no Belarusian forces took part in the invasion and so on and so on. That probably he's trying to offer now this sort of a truce between Ukraine and Russia. So I think that the role he plays is actually, yes, very important, because we don't have Switzerland, we don't have Poland, we don't have Yugoslavia of it used to be, to give a ground to the talks. And it's interesting, the figure who is heading the Russian negotiations is not some seasoned diplomat or former foreign policy official by Mr. Medinsky. I know him personally. He's a smart intellectual guy, but he's a very conservative right-wing guy who wrote books about how Ukraine is not really a country and so on and so on. It's interesting. He's a very toxic figure, former minister of culture. But because he's Putin's envoy, so he probably has, he's acting not on his own, of course, but as an envoy of the president, so he will probably lay some kind of cards down. I believe the important things will be to Ukraine to adopt, a provision in constitution that it will not go on the NATO, and maybe the parts of this Donbass will stay with Russia under Russian protectorate, and then the Kiev and other cities will be left intact. That will save face for President Zelensky, who is acting very bravely. From a former comedian and seasoned actor, he's turning into a figure of Salvador Allende, and I'm serious about this. He's actually proved himself a much more stronger person, unlike President Saakashvili of Georgia, who has launched the war against Russia, and it was very different than the situation now.
All right, our time is up. Dr. Anna Matviva and Alexander Bratetsky, thank you both for your time and for talking to WION today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us. Bye-bye.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.